Looking for not.
Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. I have my distinguished panel with me today, Scott Ritter, Diane Sare, and Dennis Speed. And we're going to talk about a really important subject today, the culture of violence in America. Everybody can agree that we live in a violent society, so I think a discussion about it would be really interesting. So, Diane, you're the senatorial candidate. Why don't you start off?
Well, okay. Thanks. Also, I will say not only am I senatorial candidate, but my training was as a classical musician. So obviously, this is a very urgent topic. I, given the current situation unfolding in Europe right now, which I think epitomizes the violent culture, the fact that the United States and NATO have found themselves fully behind or perhaps running and orchestrating a Nazi infested regime in Ukraine, I went back to look at something that we called the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the United States, because there was a real assault. I mean, I don't think it's natural for human beings to be violent. I think that's very unnatural. It is unnatural for human beings to want to harm other human beings. Left to their own devices, people would work for, I think, common interests, the common good, and the betterment of their standard of living and their society. So how do you induce people to become destructive and self-destructive? And uh, what happened during World War II was that the United States, unlike France, Germany, Italy, Spain, where you had the nations go fascist uh, for various reasons. And there was an attempt to run a coup against Franklin Roosevelt. In fact, there was an assassination attempt before he was inaugurated. There was an attempt to run a coup that was thwarted by Smedley Butler. Uh, it was a problem because the United States would not become fascist, that Americans somehow remained committed to this principle of the general welfare. We built our way out of the Great Depression. We defeated Hitler. We collaborated, I would say, with Russia and China. So the question was how to pervert that intent. And you had a number of projects, MK Ultra, where the CIA and the Tavistock Institute introduced LSD on college campuses. You had an assault on music with the introduction of the Beatles, where I have to say, and it sounds like an invasion of these various insects we're trying to stop now. But at the first concerts of the Beatles, people were actually paid to scream and yell and go crazy to create a phenomenon. Um, and then it kind of went down from there to the point where you had video games developed for use in the military to get people over their natural inhibition against killing another person, which then somehow through Hollywood and elsewhere became marketable to children. So you have children playing on video games, which are designed for the military to train people how to kill. And the fact that people don't see anything wrong with this, or they see this as part of our First Amendment rights or something, are major factors. And finally, I think the economy. If you have a collapse of the economy, people, instead of looking at their neighbors as partners and peers, begin to get into this sort of Darwinian mode of survival of the fittest. Everyone is a competitor. The only way I can protect myself is by keeping you down or keeping you succeeding is a threat to my survival. And it's a very ugly, pessimistic view. So there's much more to be said. I've thrown out a whole bunch of things right now, but I think there are many complex factors that have gone into this culture, and I think it could be changed, frankly, relatively easily and quickly with a change in policy. Because again, I just really want to stress, I don't think human beings are violent, anti-human killers by nature. I think it's an induced behavior.
Dennis?
Uh, about 20 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman wrote a book called Stop Teaching Our Children to Kill. And in the course of that book, he referenced the battlefield of Gettysburg, and that at the conclusion of the battle, when the weapons were inspected, approximately something well over half, some people claim as many as 80% of the weapons had actually not been fired. Some people had multiple rounds that they had continued to stuff into their guns and that fired them. One of the things that was noted was that what people would do is they would pass weapons to someone that would fire them, or they would reload that person's weapons. Even in the case of the Second World War, it's the case that Marines, not Marines, I'd say just because that was different, but the average military man found it very difficult to kill. What happened was that during the period in the sort of leading into Vietnam, but coming out of Vietnam, the issue of trying to train the soldier to instantaneously respond, not think about it, became a major focus. Video games, or what we call video games today, were originally sort of a point and shoot mechanism, which was designed to get people over not even the inclination to kill. It wasn't that, it was more get them over the reflex not to kill. So you created killing as a reflex. One of the things that became notable, and the reason that Dave Grossman wrote the book at the time, was because of one particular case in Paducah, Arkansas, where a young man, I think he was 13, may have been 14, student killed 4 or 5 of his fellow students. But what happened was he killed them in a period of something like 30 seconds. A teacher whom he apparently respected came up to him, called his name, and said, "Give me the gun." And after a few seconds, he simply handed him the gun. And what had happened was, because of the rate of the level at which, the depth at which the video game process had been played by this child, actually, he was able to kill at that rapidity. We can talk about why he was in that state of mind. We can talk about a lot of other things, but I'm talking about the simple capacity to hit a target with a kill effect. Now, that is not natural. It does not come from, the particular things, let's say, that were said or done or thought on the issue of violence. That's important, and it's important to explore that. But there's another factor which we have to consider. And I'm not even talking about whether you ban these games or you don't ban them. I think you should, but I don't think that bans work. I think people forget around them. I think the real issue is, what does it mean that we have had a process where this kind of thing has happened? There are a lot of people that have a capacity that they don't even know they have necessarily in that sense, and that can be deployed and utilized by them at will. That's a pretty different culture you're in which that capacity. I don't have that capacity. I think most people over 50 don't, or 40, but a lot of people who are 18 have it. And so I just wanted to bring that up because it was something that he wondered about and he was very, very focused on.
Diane, before I get to Scott, I have 2 questions for you. Number 1 is the introduction of LSD to the college campuses. Who did that? And number 2, who paid the young girls to scream at a Beatle concert?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly. The CIA was involved in this MK Ultra project, and they've had a lot of money. And the Tavistock Institute is British, and they actually, I think this is another clue in our search here for the cause of this violence. They were very, very freaked out about the Apollo mission, the kind of optimism of the space program. They said the space program is absolutely horrible because every man, woman, and dog in the United States is going to want to become a scientist. So I think it's a combination of factors. I know if you look at certain recording labels like rap, so-called music, the big labels, at least years ago, were owned by Seagrams. They were owned by big alcohol, big tobacco. It's this, if you think about the culture of a so-called free trade system, which is not what the United States was based on, then you have a tiny handful of people with billions and billions of dollars who thrive on creating an enemy image and turning people against each other so they don't all notice that they're being looted by the same small group of billionaires.
Mm-hmm. Scott?
Well, I will venture to guess that of the four of us in this panel, I'm the only trained killer here.
I agree.
I'm a highly trained killer. I'm programmed to kill. The Marine Corps made me that way. I wanted to be that way. I volunteered to be in the Marine Corps. I wasn't forcefully taken in. I was raised as a child of a professional military officer. My father and mother were the most loving parents one could ever imagine. Our household was a household of peace, of compassion. But I lived in a culture of violence. War surrounded me 24/7. Not just in terms of the life I lived overseas on base, etc. I grew up in the era of the Vietnam War. My father was there. My uncle was there. All my friends' fathers were there. Some of my friends' fathers didn't come home. So war and the reality of war was there. And with it comes something that's rather uncomfortable, the dehumanization, the willing dehumanization. We were fighting the Viet Cong, Charlie. I mean, they're not humans. It's Charlie. We're fighting Charlie. I grew up in a generation where we still had general officers who fought the Japs, the Nips, the Krauts, not Germans, not Japanese, but we dehumanize them. There's a dehumanizing factor. And this was all before I joined, and I wanted to join, and I did join. I have to tell you, the Marine Corps is different from any other culture. I was in the Army, and I was trained as a soldier. The Army doesn't do violence. It doesn't. The Army does organization. The Army does some discipline. The Marine Corps is violent from moment one. The second you get off that bus and you get on the yellow footsteps, there is violence 24/7. You are surrounded by men shouting at you, yelling at you, scaring you, intimidating you, challenging you. That's it. Challenging your manhood, challenging who you are, what you are. Can you meet the standard? Do you have what it takes? Are you going to quit, or are you going to step up and do it? And we did, the Marine Corps is unique today. We do the bayonet drill, to actually feel what it's like to stick a bayonet into something, twist it, then pull it out, butt stroke it, move on. We're trained shooters. We go on the range and learn how to, the art of marksmanship. No one trains their riflemen the way we train ours. We're trained killers. We live to kill. That's what we do. That's good. I want to tell you why it's good. Because if we go to war, you need people like me. You need a lot of people like me, because war's not supposed to be fair. I'm not going to give you a chance to win. I'm going to slaughter you. I'm going to wade into you. I'm going to annihilate you. But your society better not reflect this, or your society is going to have real problems. And here's the thing. I have no problem with training people like me to join the Marine Corps and kill. I have a real problem with the nation thinking that this reflects national standards, that this is what our nation stands for. If we think our nation stands for trained killers, we've got real problems. And yet we allow people like me to leave the military after serving in a combat zone and join the police force, join corrections institutions. So we have people who think violence is the norm, now interfacing with society in one way or another, inflicting the violence on them, and society's okay with this. Society seems to be okay. Now, when I say society, trust me, I don't think the inner city America is okay with it. I don't think any place that's subjected with to extensive police violence is okay with it. But, mainstream white America, my little town of Bethlehem, New York, we're cool with cops because cops don't bother white people. They give us speeding tickets every now and then, things of that nature. But, when was the last time I got pulled over for a traffic violation, and as a cop approached me, I feared for my life? Never. But that cop coming towards me is trained killer. Why is your police officer a trained killer? Why does your police officer believe that he's at war with the public? Because we've militarized the police, and we've in effect militarized our society to accept this militarization of the police. We live in a militarized society. So it's more than just computer games. Every aspect of how our society interfaces with itself is violence-based. Violence-based. Think about it. It's not just about pulling a gun and pulling the trigger. We're all about revenge, political revenge. It's not about having a debate, losing a debate, and shaking hands and walking off the stage. I need to destroy the person before I get there. I need to prepare the constituencies by engaging in information warfare, propaganda. This is why, look at what we're doing to Julian Assange. That's political violence. That's part of the violence of culture. Even though we're not killing him, we're destroying him. And again, look, I grew up playing football and baseball. I gotta tell you, if I get on the football field, I want to win. I didn't get on the field to lose. But you know what? If I play a nice hard game and they beat me, I was trained to get in the line and shake their hands and say, good game, good sport, way to go. And then you train harder next time to win because there was rules, and you realized it was just a game. That when the game was over, you went on to live life, drink beer with the guys you just beat the crap out of each other a moment ago. But that's not how our society works right now. This is a zero-sum game. We have to win at all costs. And all costs includes violence, not just physical violence, but psychological violence, institutional violence. And that's the society we live in. And I think we have to do a better job of reimagining who we are as a people, and not allowing the lowest common, because here's the other thing I'll say about this. Violence is the lowest common denominator. It's base. It's animalistic. You don't have to think to be violent. You have to be trained to be violent. I agree with Dennis. The concept of taking me out of high school and saying, go kill somebody, I'd be like, no. I mean, I've been in fights before, but the fight, we punched each other, we rolled around on the ground, and we got broken apart, we shook hands, and it was over. I didn't want to hurt the guy, really. I didn't want to kill him. The concept of me suddenly going in and being what I was when I emerged, somebody who could kill like that. No, you have to be trained to kill. But the society also has to be programmed to accept this. And this, I think we need to find a way to work together so that violence is not acceptable, that violence is rejected systemically, that negotiated settlements, compromise. Right now, when people say compromise, one of the first things people think is weakness. We compromised. Oh, you're weak. Why didn't you win? Life ain't about winning. Life's about peacefully coexisting, and we need to find a way to get back on track. I apologize. I took too long, but that was...
No, that's fine. A question for you. You talk about the militarization of the police department. Then when the George Floyd situation happened, you were not surprised.
No, come on. The guy, I forget what he passed a bad bill.
Right.
The way you deal with the bad bill, first of all, nobody's life is being threatened. So it's not a life and death situation. So you come in and you want to talk to the guy. Let's say he doesn't want to talk to you. Let's say he's a little at edge. Why do I have to detain him right now? He doesn't threaten anybody. I know who he is. I know where he lives. So I just sit there and go, hey, Floyd, we're going to hold off on this right now. He seems a little agitated. We're just going to withdraw. And we're going to try and approach him later on when maybe, he may not be under the influence of drugs. He may not be upset about something. There's a way to do this. There's police forces all around the world that practice de-escalation, that live de-escalation. The Germans spend more time learning how not to shoot their weapon than we do training our cops in totality. Pulling a weapon for a cop should, I honestly believe that if a cop pulls a weapon, he should be immediately withdrawn from the force, and there should be an investigation into it. Cops should be programmed not to pull their weapons, because most of the times they don't need to pull their weapons. Weapons are the last resort. In fact, I'm sort of a big fan of the model of cops not having any weapons when they directly interface, that we have units in reserve that can be brought in. But when you approach society armed with a weapon, and they know that that weapon, you are trained to kill them, to treat everybody as they are. Cops aren't trained to differentiate. Everybody is a potential enemy. Everybody is there to kill the cop. This is a problem.
What? It's still alleged that money was counterfeit. Was it proven?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Bill?
It doesn't matter, because it's not a life and death situation. The same thing with the guy in New York that was selling cigarettes. Who's going to die from that? All you have to do is say, dude, let's talk about this. Bring in somebody who's not looking violent. You don't have to surround him. Just have somebody come in and talk to him. Why we have to go straight to violence, and why we have to go straight to killing a civilian, killing a citizen, is beyond me.
Dennis, as a black man, do you have any thoughts on this?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. I have a very different view of this entire process. I think that something different has happened in the United States. I think that the nation is fundamentally different. I think the youth in the nation are fundamentally different. I don't think you're dealing with the problem. That problem is there. That was the problem that was confronted by the Black Panther Party for self-defense in Oakland. That's why they went out with guns and with law books, and why they would cite laws when they would talk to the police. That's the way they did it. That's what Huey P. Newton was. He was a law student. So, and the reason that they had the weapons displayed was because under California law, you could open carry a weapon. That's what they did. So so there is a way that problem has been addressed in American history. These are people, I will simply say, that I did know and knew fairly well, particularly in Philadelphia. Not extremely well. I wasn't a member of the Panther Party, but I did bring Black Panther Party members to speak at the local college I was attending. So I know about that problem. I know what one has to do, and that's true. And what happened in the Floyd case is what clearly happened in the Floyd case. He was executed. Then people tried to stop an execution by imploring the policeman, but they didn't. That's the case. And so people like to look at that case because that's so egregiously, right, like an execution. It's easy to wrap your mind around that. It's less easy to deal with the fact that you'll get one shooter is in a mall. He comes out with some automatic weapon, semi-automatic weapon. He manages to shoot and kill 3 people. And then he's shot and killed by a good guy with a gun who kills him at like 45 yards by taking the gun from his girlfriend. It's his girlfriend's gun. Takes the gun and shoots and kills this guy at 40. What now? Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he was a trained military officer. I don't think so. And I think he said that. The man said that he had just been trained by his grandfather, somebody to shoot. Well, when you have that, when that's your situation, right? And you have to feel relieved that some stranger in a mall, by the way, where you could have been walking, like took somebody out. Well, what does it say about where you are? It says that something very different has happened. That's what I'm trying to suggest. And I don't have a problem with what's being stated. I'm just trying to get people to actually face in the conversation we're having, not you guys, but the people that are listening to us. Where are we really living now? That's my point.
Diane?
Well, I was thinking about something just yesterday was the 21st anniversary of 9/11. and this question that Scott raised about revenge versus justice. Here we are 21 years after a horrific event. When we talked with you, Cynthia, we had Kirk Wiebe from the NSA on, who told us that high-ranking people in the NSA went to Michael Hayden. They said, there's going to be a major attack, and they were told to be quiet, and nothing was done. And you can't deny that there had to have been an inside element in terms of how you hijack all these planes. Nothing is scrambled, nothing. And then all the Saudis get on a flight and leave the country, including Osama bin Laden's brother or somebody or other. Here we are 21 years later. What did we do? We destroyed Afghanistan, we destroyed Iraq, and in the process, thousands of Americans were killed. I think about 5,000 in Iraq, but if you add the private contractors, it's about double that. And millions of people were killed, over 1 million, I think, in Iraq between our various wars. And then how many millions of people are now refugees all over the place? So ostensibly, because 3,000 Americans were killed in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Diane, I gotta make a statement. 3,000 people, nearly 3,000 people were killed at the World Trade Center that day. But I recently heard a report that the rise of cancer in that vicinity is increasing. So we could, say that number is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, sure. And I actually met a firefighter from there who's awaiting a lung transplant to this day when I was on the street campaigning. Absolutely. But my point is, however many 3,000, 10,000, 20,000 millions of people on the planet were made to suffer, supposedly to somehow right this wrong. And what has the result been? We have more violence, more terrorism, more economic hardship, but somehow it's not addressed. So I think that's true. I think part of the way of getting over this is we have to have a higher mission, which actually allows us to love the quality in every person, which makes us human. That is probably one of the most violent ideologies that we have right now, is this green ideology that human beings are responsible for climate change, which has been occurring for billions of years. And even if you wanted to say we were responsible for it, which I think is kind of arrogant, but then we also can solve it by coming up with nuclear power, greening the desert, that there's a kind of optimism when you recognize the potential that human beings have to do the good. And if you have a mission which you can't accomplish on your own, but you actually need, it's so big that you depend on other people to join you in this mission, instead of being resentful or egotistical if someone makes a breakthrough, you actually celebrate the discovery or the breakthrough that's made by someone else. And clearly we have lost our sense of what it actually means to be human, why we are unique, what the human mind is capable of doing, and what we can do as a society when we collaborate, when we cherish the insights of our colleagues. I think, as I said, this hatred of human life, that every child is just a carbon footprint destroying the environment every time they exhale. I don't think that's really conducive to ending violence.
I believe that we have only scratched the surface. We've talked for like a half hour already. I'd like to continue the discussion at a later date, and I'd like your opinion, all of you, what direction this conversation should take. Diane?
Well, I would like to talk about the solutions to this, because I don't want to wallow in it. I want to figure out how we get out of it.
Okay. Dennis?
Yeah, the same thing. I think that there's a role, and there has been a role that particularly in musical instruction and other instruction of youth has to play right now in averting this. I think you could do a lot about it, and I think that's what we should discuss.
Scott?
When I start off by saying I'm probably the only trained killer here, I'm also probably the person least qualified to talk about this issue. I mean, so my job right now is to learn more. I spent my entire adult life in isolation from American society. And when I reintegrated into American society in 1998, it was under the conditions where the FBI was trying to destroy me. So I'm still trying to figure out what this thing is called America, the country I live in. Dennis, I don't have the background you do. Diane, I don't have the background you do. I'm ignorant when it comes to the reality of day-to-day life in America because I didn't grow up with that reality. So I think my role is to be a student and to listen and to learn. And maybe by doing so, then I can come up with answers. But I operate on if you try to solve a problem, or if you come up with a solution to a problem without actually defining the problem, you don't have a solution. And I'm probably not the person to come to define the problem because I've been living a weird life. I would like to help come up with a solution, but I think my first step is to learn, is to listen and learn.
Yes, but being on the periphery is important because you're like not totally in it, so you could look at it more
If I could just say
objectively or
one thing,
subjectively than other people can. Dennis?
I just want to say one thing in terms of what Scott, you brought something here which was essential. In fact, I had thought before I started talking the first time to defer to you immediately because of the fact of what you talked about, which is the responsibility for taking another life, which is what every soldier, whether we're talking about a Revolutionary War soldier, Civil War soldier, we can talk about wherever, or a policeman for that matter, has to consider. And so I think your being involved in this discussion, both today and in the future, is essential because what it does is it causes the parameters of the discussion to be defined by the reality that armies are, up until now, an essential part of history. And more importantly, the responsibility for life is something that if I'm going to respond to a question, I'm staring at you and I know what you've had to do on behalf of this country, which you've considered to be a privilege and an honor to do. That's exactly the issue of why these discussions are so important for us to have as a nation as a whole.
One last question for you guys. Does the media cover this in a substantial way or a substantive way at all? What do you think, Dennis?
I think that the thing we're talking about is not covered, but I do think it's possible by these kinds of dialogues to create a completely different situation in America. A lot of people are very upset by this issue. They're trying to figure this out, okay? And I think this is an important matter to take in front of the public. I mean, I supported the American Revolution. I think you should have had an army. I supported what happened in the Civil War for sure. I supported Frederick Douglass recruiting 200,000 people to fight, okay, who were Black in the army. But at the same time, what's the responsibility for that? So the media, I don't think, takes this on. I'm glad you're doing it, Cynthia. This is really very important.
Diane, do you think that the media covers this in any substantive way?
Yeah, they encourage violence. That's
Okay. Scott, what do you think?
Okay, how can I beat that one? Look, no, the media is partisan politics. No issue is covered without people trying to score partisan points. And I think the media has done a horrible job. They do cover the issue, but they do it not to study the problem and come up with solutions to the problem. They do it to score political points for whatever ideology they're supporting, and that's just not good. So again, I second Dennis's applause for what you're doing here because I think, again, what I like about this is we can talk here and people can say I disagree with you, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing
Right.
because Anybody who is so narcissistic to think that they alone have the solution, they alone have the experience, you probably need to disengage from the problem solving thing, because you're not solving it, you're making it worse. We have a bunch of people here who come at life from different experiences, and we're trying to talk about a very complex problem. And so we throw things out there and people say, yeah, I hear you, but, and then you're supposed to listen and go, that's cool, but, and then we talk about it. And, I don't think our job is to convince one another. I think the purpose of the show is to put the ideas out there so that the listener can
Right.
listen to it and go, wow, we got people talking informed, politely,
Right.
civilly, and they're making me think. And that's the foundation of any solution, is the intellectual curiosity and integrity that's necessary to think through a problem by acquiring the facts. So you're doing that, Cynthia. Dennis, applaud you. Diane, always. And I'm humbled that you guys thought that I could contribute something.
Thank you. So you've been listening to Diane Sare, Dennis Speed, and Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and this is a topic that will be continued. Thank you for participating, and thanks everybody for listening. Have a great day.